Rounds 2 and 3 of the NFL draft absolutely did not disappoint. Perhaps the most fantasy-friendly round 2 and 3 that we've seen in recent memory. Let's go find out who the winners for fantasy football were from day 2 of the 2025 NFL draft.
It's short king summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's short king summer.
We have to begin with probably my favorite prospect and landing spot of the entire class. Kaleb Johnson was selected to the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 3rd round of the 2025 NFL draft. Kaleb Johnson was so impressive to me in college, 4.42 yards after contact average. That's insanely impressive for a guy who played for Iowa. He forced 66 missed tackles. He ran equally well out of a zone and out of a gap scheme. He was fantastic in breakaway percentage, 56.1% breakaway percentage for Kaleb Johnson. He lands in a backfield with Jaylen Warren, and no disrespect intended to Jaylen Warren, but Jaylen Warren was not able to hold off Najee Harris. I don't think that he's going to be able to hold off Kaleb Johnson. My guess is that Kaleb Johnson is going to open fantasy football drafts as roughly a 6th round pick, and frankly, I just think that that is going to be far too low. My guess would be that he's probably going to immediately top what Najee Harris did his final season as a Pittsburgh Steeler. In his final season, Najee went 263 rushes, but awful yards per carry. 4 yards per carry, only 1,000 rushing yards, 6 rushing touchdowns, and also was less productive in the passing game with only 36 receptions. Kaleb Johnson was not a great receiver at Iowa, and I think that's okay considering he played for, well, Iowa. In fact, Kaleb Johnson's final season, he had more yards from scrimmage than the team had passing yards. Truly insane, but 22 receptions, 190 yards, 1.29 yards per route run for Kaleb Johnson, his final season. I think he's probably the biggest winner relative to consensus that you are going to find in 25 NFL drafts. So huge win for Kaleb Johnson. A much more popular win, RJ Harvey. RJ Harvey was sort of everyone's favorite running back sleeper prospect heading into the draft, ends up getting 2nd round draft capital. The Broncos traded back 2 separate times, then selected Harvey with one of the final picks of the 2nd round. I don't see any way that Harvey does not immediately lead this backfield in touches after going at pick 60. His final season at UCF, he forced 69 missed tackles. He generated 897 yards after contact, but averaged 6.8 yards per carry, including multiple games with over 8 yards per carry. He was also super effective as a receiver, a 52% breakaway percentage as a senior, a 50% breakaway percentage as a junior. One of those things you might worry about a little bit, like, oh, if RJ Harvey's so good, why didn't he declare in 2023? I think he pretty clearly made the right decision coming back. He very likely would not have been a 2nd round pick last year. He also had, an incredibly strong combine, 4.4, one of the fastest 40-yard dashes. He's very quick, and he's going to be better than Jaleel McLaughlin. Maybe he won't be a better interior rusher than Audric Estime, but the depth chart, I would expect, literally heading into week 1 of training camp, I would be surprised if even Sean Payton, who is notoriously pretty difficult on rookies, I would be very surprised if RJ Harvey was not considered the top running back there. Also had at least 20 receptions all 3 years that he started at UCF and had at least 200 receiving yards. I expect him to be able to, immediately leap into that vaunted quote unquote joker role inside of the Denver Broncos offense. Is he Darren Sproles? Probably not. Could he be Pierre Thomas plus? I think he could probably be Pierre Thomas plus. And Harvey was a 13th, 14th round pick in fantasy football before the NFL draft. I mean, is there any reason why he would not be a 7th round pick? Now, who would you rather have in fantasy football? David Montgomery is a clear running back 2 for Detroit, or RJ Harvey, in my mind, the clear running back 1 for Denver. I think you'd probably rather have RJ Harvey. I need more time to think about it. This is an immediate reaction video, but I think I'd probably rather have RJ Harvey. Let's move now to one of the pass catchers, a guy who was maybe a little bit not expected to be drafted as high as he was. At pick 34. The Houston Texans actually trade up for Jayden Higgins. They also took his teammate Jalen Knoll later. We are not going to talk about Jalen Knoll in this video. I think he's actually probably maybe a slight loser as a round 3 pick, but I expect Knoll to play well. Higgins, the more interesting prospect to me. So he goes at pick 34. He had a really exciting combine because he was fast and big, weighed in at 260. 36% market share of yards his final season. You can look at his comps here. Some awesome comps. Hopkins, A.J. Brown, T. Higgins. Some not so great. Also, Michael Thomas, Ohio State Michael Thomas, which actually is my favorite comp for him as like kind of a possession-based big guy. Normally when we say power slot, we mean a guy who's going to suck in the NFL. But I think in the case of Higgins, I think this is actually probably a good power slot. You can see some busts in here as well. Rashad Perryman, Jonathan Baldwin, Quinshon Judkins, and N'Keal Harry. My guess would be he's a little bit better than those guys just based off athleticism. The concerns about those guys would have been athleticism based, and I just don't think that you can be worried about Jalen Knoll's athleticism. I think he is just very likely an athletic, good NFL player. I'm incredibly excited about where he landed. He also landed on a depth chart where he should be able to play from game 1, week 1. He's not going to not be on the field for Xavier Hutchinson. He's not going to not be on the field for Kyle Stover. I just don't really see any way. I just don't really see any way that is the case. So Jayden Higgins at pick 34, I think he has to be viewed as a massive win. Let's look at maybe a little bit of an unexpected winner next. We have Kyle Williams from Washington State, who was teammates with Cam Ward. A lot of people thought that he might actually be a pick for the Tennessee Titans. That's not what happened. He gets drafted at pick 69. Nice. Out of Washington State by the New England Patriots. And the Patriots have not hit on a round 2 wide receiver since Deion Branch in 2022, Jalen Polk last year. So maybe they were just trying to avoid that jinx by selecting Kyle Williams, who, again, let's just be honest, a little bit of a slow start to his career. Kind of a long and winding road for Kyle Williams. 426 yards, 601 yards, 541 yards, 842 yards, then finally really breaks out his final season. We don't always love these late breakout wide receivers, the 4th-year guys, the 5th-year guys. You bring in, look, let's just be honest, you bring in a lot of busts. That's kind of the reason why we wouldn't be into someone like Jonathan Mingo, kind of why we wouldn't want to be into Xavier Legette. I wonder if the Panthers have a little bit of a type, but it seems like the film guys were very in on Kyle Williams. So you always have to pay attention when that happens. And if you look at some of the sim scores for Kyle Williams, you do have some other late breakout style guys, Sterling Shepard, T.Y. Hilton, Tyler Lockett, a very late breakout at Kansas State, and a late breakout in the NFL. Manuel Sanders is a comp that I've heard quite a bit, from film people, right? From people who, they don't do statistical analysis. They don't care, what the stats of this guy might look like. So to see Emmanuel Sanders come up as a high-level comp here is pretty interesting, that the statistical comp would also mirror the film comp. Now, he also is in another wide open depth chart if we think about the Patriots, because the Patriots, their best player right now is injured. Their best pass catcher is going to be rehabbing from an ACL injury. These are the other guys that Kyle Williams will have to, quote unquote, beat out for playing time. Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte, Matt Collins, Kendrick Bourne, Jalen Polk, and Javon Baker. I'm going to guess Baker gets cut. I'm going to guess Kendrick Bourne probably gets cut. I would guess the starting personnel, even when everyone's healthy, I'm going to guess that by the time Stephon Diggs is healthy, and remember, we think of Stephon Diggs as a slot wide receiver, but he's really not. I'm going to guess Kyle Williams might even just be starting for the Week 1 Patriots. Obviously, we've got our boy Drake May there. We love Drake May, as we should. And Drake May is going to be the type of he's going to be the type of quarterback who adds value to his wide receivers as opposed to needing his wide receivers to add value to him. And I just don't see any way he's not one of the biggest winners of the wide receiver position. Before we move to his teammates, let's move to another one of the winners at the wide receiver position. We have my boy, Jack Bech, who did lead Louisiana State University while teammates with Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors, Trey Palmer, led Louisiana State University in receptions. Not receiving yards, not touchdowns, but in receptions. Does absolutely nothing for 2 years. Just nothing for LSU in 2022, 2023. But then we have huge final season at TCU. 32% dominator rating, 2.28 yards per team attempt. That is quite strong. And Bech was actually a little bit more athletic than you might think. You might see the white wide receiver / tight end, but he had a 34.5 vert, 10.5 broad, really strong 3-cone and short shuttle. Also came in at 214 pounds, 19 reps on the bench press, just kind of like a little bit of everything. Didn't actually run the 40 at the combine. I don't really care about that because he also landed, very similar, landed on another depth chart where it is just wide open. Outside of Bowers and Myers, there is absolutely nothing standing in his way. Trey Tucker, Christian Wilkinson, Alex Bachman, Turner Overdrive, Tyreek McAllister. Now, sure, Trey Tucker, he might start the year for the Las Vegas Raiders, but he's not going to finish the year. It's very funny to see Mingo as the top comp. I think that we should probably go ahead and plug in a little bit of draft capital here and see what the sim score gives us, because I'm going to guess the sims immediately get better once the computer knows that he is going to be a second-round pick. So we've got Paris Campbell. We've got actually a fair amount of bust in here, which I guess is fairly interesting. We've got Josh Palmer in there as a guy who did kind of hang around. The second page, where the sim score comps are a little bit less strong, we've got Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin actually is a fairly good comp, not stylistically, but in terms of production profile. So a lot of misses in there. So maybe I need to tone down my bullishness just a smidge. Back to the New England Patriots now. We have got Treveyon Henderson, his final season at Ohio State, 4.43 yards after contact, average, equally good zone versus gap, actually basically no distinction in how he did there. 53.9% breakaway percentage. He, Ashton Genty, and the aforementioned Kaleb Johnson were basically the best in the NFL at that. 7 yards per carry. The thing I am concerned about with Henderson is that he was a little bit limited in terms of total volume at Ohio State, but getting drafted by the New England Patriots at pick 39 overall helps me allay that concern a little bit, because I would guess that Vrabel kind of wanted his guy. There was a lot of talk heading up to the draft, like the old regime paid Ramondre, but it's a lot of money. The only reason why Vrabel was involved in a timeshare offense was because of the floor. The only reason he wanted to run the ball so much, though, was because of Derrick Henry. I think we got our answer. And our answer is that Treveyon Henderson is going to be a huge part of what a much improved Patriots offense does. Just getting some adults. Even if it's Josh McDaniel is way more of an adult than Alex Van Pelt. Alex Van Pelt was absolutely clueless. Treveyon Henderson was kind of like a 6th round, early 7th round pick in early best ball contests. I don't see any way. Well, maybe it's not true that there's not any way, but my base projection would be that he has both more receptions and carries than Ramondre Stevenson. I also think this offense is going to be significantly better than it was last year. And if it is significantly better than it was last year, again, I just don't see any reason why I would want to take some of these veteran running backs. Who would I want? Treveyon Henderson or Kenneth Walker? Might take Walker. Now, Alvin Kamara or Treveyon Henderson? I think I'm certainly siding with Treveyon Henderson there. Because the volume concerns just don't matter as much to me once a team spends a second-round pick on them. We also have, multiple tight end winners. I could have done Arroyo here. I could have done Harold Fannin for the Browns. But I think we have to go with Mason Taylor, who, again, landed on this I guess these teams decided that they did want to draft for need all of a sudden, because I don't think any team needed pass catchers more than the Jets. They had no tight end. Jeremy Ruckert, Stone Smart, Zach Kuntz, and someone who I actually don't know, whose name is Neil Johnson. Never heard of Neil Johnson. But Mason Taylor was basically a 3-year starter at LSU. Now, he never had crazy numbers at LSU, but isn't that kind of what you would anticipate from a tight end who played at LSU? I think that is probably about right. We can't all be Jack Bech. In 2022, Mason Taylor finished third for receptions on a team that had Neighbors, Quinshon Judkins, Brian Thomas Jr., Kyron Lacy, the aforementioned Jack Bech. In fact, he outplayed Jack Bech kind of as that third guy. Then the next season at LSU, you might think, maybe got a little bit better, maybe got a little bit easier. Nope, Neighbors, BTJ, Kyron Lacy, we're all still on the team. Finally, he gets away from some of those guys. Aaron Anderson hits the scene. Kyron Lacy still has a good season. And then Taylor does have his most productive season, 55 receptions, 546 yards with 2 touchdowns. I think 42 overall draft capital with all the good reporting, with the early declaring at 20 years old as a tight end. I mean, he's 3 years younger than Tyler Warren. I view Mason Taylor as basically the biggest raw number riser in terms of where he's going to go in rankings. I mean, we're talking about a guy who would have ranked outside of the top 200 in terms of projected points. I mean, I think we have to move this guy all the way up. Who scores more fantasy points as a rookie? Mason Taylor or Tyler Warren? Really think about that before you answer it, because I think the answer might be Mason Taylor. Next up, we have Tre Harris, who again did go a little bit earlier than I thought at pick 55 to the Chargers. He is going to be replacing Joshua Palmer's snaps. I think he's an upgrade immediately. He definitely is not like a blazer, like a great vertical threat, but he's a big target. He's basically you want an easy, kind of lazy comp for Tre Harris. Honestly, he's a better version of Quinshon Judkins. He's going to be a nice compliment to Ladd. Honestly, he might just be better than Mike Williams at Mike Williams' age. This does probably dispel the notion that Keenan Allen is going to come back to the team. And Tre Harris's college stats, I've never seen something like this before. His final season yards per route run, 5.12. In my memory, I don't ever recall a wide receiver having a yards per route run of 5.12. In fact, in all of college football, if we look at a minimum amount of targets, there's just no way anyone's even going to be close. Casey Reynolds and Dante Thornton Jr. Casey Reynolds played at Army. Of course he did. So he ran absolutely no routes. The only guys above 4. Dante Thornton Jr., who probably is going to get picked on day 3 of the draft. There's a little preview sleeper name for you there. But Tre Harris, I think you have to just view him as a huge win. There was a need in that room, and the need was answered. And I didn't really love him as a prospect, but this is probably just a good reminder in general. Don't bury your head in the sand. When a team says that they really like you by choosing you in the second round, and there's an obvious need in their depth chart, it's okay to change your priors. And I'm gonna have to change my priors about Tre Harris. Our final winner is Quinshon Judkins. I was trying to decide which of these running backs truly went to the best spot. Was it RJ Harvey to the Broncos? Was it Kaleb Johnson to the Steelers, was Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders. And I think truly the best situation for just pure rushing production and absolutely no one to compete with, it really might be Quinshon Judkins after he got drafted at the first pick of the second round, or very early on in the second round. Sorry, the Browns had 2 picks there. Pick 36 to the Browns from Jacksonville, Quinshon Judkins. A lot of people thought Henderson was going to go before him. A lot of people thought Henderson was more desirable. 2 true workhorse seasons for Judkins, 274, 271 rushes. Was in a clear timeshare, but a clear timeshare with someone else who is an NFL second round pick. They went right next to each other in the NFL draft. I think that's meaningful, and I think that's the kind of thing that we need to evaluate. Now, there are a little bit of concerns with Judkins' tackle breaking, only 3.04 yards after contact. Average, was not a great receiver, but was a fine wide receiver, had to play injured in his 2023 season, which really limited his breakaway rate, really limited, just his total effectiveness. You can see how much more effective he was. 5.5 yards per carry, 5.7 yards per carry his other 2 seasons, but only 4.3 yards per carry in 2023. Judkins was also awesome in the college football playoff against Texas and against Notre Dame. I think that type of stuff is meaningful, and I think that type of stuff is meaningful for the teams that drafted him. And I think that is pretty clear. We also know Kevin Stefanski, the whole West Coast kind of thing is all about running the ball effectively. And, we'll see what they do on day 3, but the running back room for a team that loves to run the ball as much as they do, it's Jerome Ford, who has been benched for every running back you can imagine in his time in Cleveland, and Pierre Strong, who they've never really wanted to give the ball, regardless of who else, and just very strange for a team at this time of season. Those are the only guys that they have on the roster. I think the Judkins is maybe gonna get actually a little bit underrated by the nerds like me, because the pass catching's not great and some of his peripherals aren't great, and I think maybe we just need to stop being dumb nerds and say, this is the guy who can just handle the rock. David Montgomery, who shows up here on the comps list, that is a really good comp to me. Akers, maybe a little bit. Maybe Quinshon Judkins doesn't get a second contract from the Browns. Maybe Quinshon Judkins, doesn't average 5.3 yards per carry. He's not going to get Jamal Charles on his comp list, right? None of that is going to happen, and none of that even matters, because he's going to get the rock a ton, and he's going to do so on an offense that is proven to be effective at running the ball. So there you go, everyone. There are the biggest winners of day 2 of the NFL draft. Of course, we will have winners of the entire draft. We're going to have tons more analysis, so make sure that you like the video, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, and I'll be back with you guys very soon.
It's short king summer, dude. It just feels like no one in fantasy sports ever learns anything. Does he mistime it, or is Brock Bowers just a grown man? Brock Bowers is just a grown man. Dare I say, Rich, football might be back. In the words of Lane Johnson, this offense looks constipated. It's short.